Good morning and welcome back to our third lesson on Siberian blue iris flowers. I hope that you're enjoying the lesson so far. The rest of it now, as I said at the close of my last video, is pretty much going to be repeating everything that we just did, but on the other side of the painting. So you'll get to see it all demonstrated twice, and then we will tackle the background. So I'm going to start in this upright petal here. We had put in this crinkling part here earlier, and now we're ready to go to the rest of that petal. I'm first going to pick up just my Winsor Blue red shade. Without any additives to it, just that color by itself. Sort of a skim milk consistency. And I'm going to come down right along this side here in somewhat of a wide strip. That pretty much serves as the center of the petal. So now I'm going to rinse, blot, and soften the edge. And then with what's the light color that's on my brush, put this edge in because this is a lighter edge. And while this is still wet, I'm going to pick up my mix of Winsor Blue red shade mixed with Cobalt Violet. That's going to come in here on the other side. There's some ruffling and highlights on this edge. So I'm going around that right now because I don't want to fill it in. It's going to be much lighter than the rest of it. The vein lines go diagonally from the center out towards the right. So I'm just going to pull my brush that way. Now rinse, blot, and all I'm going to do is come up and tickle this edge here so that a little bit of the color comes into these white areas. There's a bit of a light edge up here that I didn't. I'll just pull some pigment out of there. It's not as bright up there as it is down here. This line here could be smoother, but I'm afraid now to mess with it because it's started to dry over here on the left, but that will need correction. I don't know. I guess I'll try. Ooh. We can actually also pull just a tad of this dark that we put down earlier over into this part of the petal. Sort of helps to connect the two. I'm going to have to pick up some of that on my brush. There isn't quite enough of it up here. And it's too wet for this to come out the way it looks in the photo. So for that, I have to have this drier. Oh, no, that's interesting. I see I have a gap here that is not in the photo. I don't know how I did that. Okay. All right, we're going to have to create this part of the petal. Okay, rinse, blot, just tickle the edge so that this fills in and the color will be lighter there. Now our petal is whole. This little spot right here I can see is background. I don't have to worry about that right now. All right, now let's come over here and complete these petals. This is a very light part of the entire painting right in here. It's capturing a lot of light. So I want to be sure on this top part of this petal that I'm very, very light. So I'm going to be very careful to only pick up a tint of the Winsor Blue red shade, just a tint of it, like we did in here. Remember, if we go too light, we can always just add more and darken it in the next layer. But if we go too dark to begin with, it's very difficult to fix it. Okay, now the petals grow this way. The vein lines are sweeping down and towards the right. And we don't want to come all the way up to the yellow. Remember, there's a white border around that. Okay. Now the petal that's underneath here is much darker, but I can't put that in while these lines here are wet. So I'm going to have to skip around as usual. We'll come over and work on this part, which also has some very light edges. So with the same tint that we've been using. Very, very light edge. This is so light, I hope you can see it. And there's a split in that petal. And then this next one is flipped. There's a curl here in the petal, which we will define with light on the outside and some darker color on the inside. Also, the bottom part here is very light. The bottom part of this one is very light. A couple of light strokes in here. Nope, that's still wet. Can't go back there. I can't really do anything right in here now until this all dries. There, so let's look at this leaf down here. There is a reflected blue light on the side of that petal that's quite light. So I'm going to go just a bit darker with the same blue color and put that in. And while we're waiting for things to dry, we can also put the same very light tint blue, same blue, on this end petal here. This one's catching a lot of light at the top part here and then back in here. Okay, back here. There's also lightness at, whoops, crossed at the bottom of this petal. Okay, this part's dry, so now we can come back in here. This is a nice rich blue, darker blue. So I'm going to use the Winsor Blue red shade with a little bit of the rose color to darken the blue. And that comes right underneath here. Rinse and blot. Carefully just tickle around where these little, where I left the little white spots. Okay. That is, this is actually supposed to be white right here, and now I just dragged my brush into it. So I'm trying to just scrub away at that. It is what it is. Okay. Now, with a lighter version of what I just put down, I need a shade that's in between this really light and this really dark. So I'm going to add water to the mix that I just made. And that seems too wimpy. I think that's more of it there. I want to test it to see what I've got. I think that's fairly good. You can see it's a middle value that's between this dark and this light. Okay, so that's going to go now in between as a darker part of the veining. Oh, I've got fuzz on my brush. As a darker part of the veining, very, very thin lines. And then there's a flip right here. This is the shadow under the flip. And this part back here is a little bit more solid. Okay, continuing on. I'm not liking how that turned out, and I'm hoping I can rescue it with a little bit darker veining, but I have to wait for it to dry. So I'll be right back. It's a little bit damp, so I think while we wait for that to dry, we can go ahead and put the yellow into that beard. And just like the other ones, we're going to start it with Cad Lemon. And this comes right up underneath here. And as long as I have it on my brush, I can put this one in too. And there's just a tiny little spot of it here. Okay, I think this is dry enough that I can work on it now. What I don't like is this area that seems all mashed together. You can't really see defined vein lines in it anymore. So I have a couple of choices. I could try to lift some of the paint out, or I can go a little bit darker with some of the vein lines and hope that that helps to mask it. And I think maybe I'm going to try going darker first. It's just going to be very, very skinny lines. And that's too dark. That's too dark. I must add more water to my paint. It's also pleasing when you're doing lines to not have them totally connect, like be one solid line from here to there, but to have breaks in the line is more artistic. So I should skip around more. Okay, it's a little bit darker back here. A little bit darker right under here. There's a flip edge. It's rolled over here and it's darker. And that's too wide. Okay. I'm happier with that now. A little bit darker back here. Could have a little bit more color in here. There's a white flipped edge. This is this mark right here is the shadow underneath the flipped edge. The flipped edge is actually white, so I have to make it look like there's this tiny white ruffle here. I think what I need to do is go darker with that shadow. Just picking up a tiny bit of darker mix. And I'm going to come right up underneath the white ruffle. This could go a little bit darker here. Okay. Okay, our yellow is dry. We can now add, what is the name of this? Cad Yellow Deep, I believe. Yes, Cad Yellow Deep. This one gets pretty dark in here. And then it fades as it comes down. So I'm going to rinse and blot, and then just come into the Cad Yellow Deep and pull it down the rest of the way, which will dilute it. And I see now that I've smudged, I smudged my petal there. A little bit there. Might as well do the same over here. There's a little piece of it, just a tiny little particle of it poking out here. Rinse and blot and pull down. Okay. All right, let's do this petal here in the background. There's not a lot going on necessarily with it. It's just a big petal that's blue and blue-violet color. Nothing terribly difficult about it. This is in the background. So when things are receding into the background, the details are not as crisp. The colors are not as vibrant. As things go back in the distance, they get more gray, more blue. Now, I'm talking, like a landscape, way, way in the distance, not just a few inches back like this petal, but still in all, it's in the background. So we don't want to make it as light and bright and interesting as all of this is. This is really the focal point of our painting right here in the middle where the light is hitting and you're seeing all that ruffles and light. So we're going to come up the middle with blue, go around this petal, go around it, and the vein lines go diagonally towards the right. We're going to fill this in with other color too. There's more blue on the right side, more violet on the left side. So now I'm going to pick up my mix of blue plus cobalt violet. I'm going to put some of that in. It's too dark. I need more water. Carefully go around. I'm going to pull some of this lavendery color from the right edge. I'm finding this paint dries so quickly on this paper. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of this paper so much, but we'll make it work. Now I want to get just a bit darker with my color. And try to pull more vein lines in here while it's still wet. That way, that's not showing up. Gotta go darker. By pulling these while the paint is still wet is going to help soften them and diffuse them so that they are not as sharply defined as what's in here. And that's another thing that will make this push to the background. It's more blurry. I don't like these little spots I'm getting with where my brush picks up. Okay, I think I'm satisfied with that for right now. I'm going to leave that be. And we can, that's dry. We can work this petal next. This is another very dark blue. Not as dark as this one. About like this one. Checking my color to be sure I'm on the right page with it. Okay, it's lighter than that. It's a little bit darker. I think that's pretty good. Okay, we've got a lot of vein lines in here and a lot of light hitting the petal on that side. So we're going to start back here. It's rather solid right at the back underneath the other petal. But then quickly you have to realize you're leaving that white border around the beard. So you can't come up and touch the yellow or you will lose that white. Now there's a dark spot right in here. And on that side, this is the ruffling. And there's another little flip down here. So this is the shadow under the flip I'm putting in right now. And I'm pulling some darker vein lines here. Now, this side of the petal, you cannot see the white border on the right side of this yellow beard. So in this particular case, we are going to come right up next to and not leave a white border. Now this little flip down here is much lighter, so I'm going back to just the main blue color, just the tint of it, like we've been using up in here. Put this little flip in here. It is lighter at the top, white roughly, and then the back edge of it is the blue. Okay. And now I want to add some fine vein lines over here. And that's really too pronounced. It needs to be hardly different in value from what I put down already. That's too dark. I'm going to have to wait for that to dry now. But in the meantime, I can go in between and take out, just by using my tint of blue, cover up some of that white. It's only white right as it comes out of the beard. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now. Let it dry before I touch it anymore. We can go on and do this skinny little petal here. Okay, this one, the front part of the petal is fairly dark, and then this back edge is much more lavender. So we'll start with just a wash of the cobalt violet plus blue. Okay, we're going to let that dry before we can put in the other side. Now the white, it's the same sort of inside of this one is here. And that has quite a violet cast to it, very similar to what we just put down. So I'm going to start with this color, knowing that I'm going to have to come in and darken the center part of what I'm putting down. But this is where I'm starting. This violet color lightens up right on this back edge here. So I'm just moistening and then pulling the color so that it becomes lighter. And there's actually a tiny little part of a petal that's growing up out of here that would match this petal here. It's got blue on the top of it. I don't want to put that in quite yet because I don't want to blur it into what I just did. But this is lots of interruptions today. Sorry about that. Okay, this front part of the petal is a darker blue that's got the rose mixed in with it. The very bottom edge is darker yet. I'm going to pick up a little bit darker shade. while this is still moist because I want it to spread. So I'm bringing the paint just along the bottom edge and letting it flow into the wet paint. A little bit of a darker edge right in there. Okay, now I can see here I came too far down. I don't know what I thought. I came too far down, but with the violet color, but it's no matter because we'll be covering it up anyways. There's a dark side on this petal. I must have missed a line or something. Approximately here. And come right up to the very bottom of that petal we put in. And again, I'm going to pick up darker mix and go right along the very bottom. This one is wider though. But we don't want a hard line in the middle there. It needs to gradually fade away. So I've rinsed and blotted, and now I'm just going to soften this edge here. This blue, I got too far up in here. Let's try to lift some of that. Okay. Now this bottom edge has to go darker yet, but I'm going to wait and put that on after this dries. And this petal here is pretty much more of the same. Let's see. The color is going to be darkest right in here where this petal is. This is a flipped up edge here. And in here, it's darker. So I'm going to start with that. Picking up a fairly dark mix of just the blue color. And I'm going to put it in here, right up next to this fold. And then put in some vein lines that don't come up and touch the yellow because there's that white border. That shows there just a little bit. And now I'm going to go into a lighter mix of the blue and rose. And I'm going to pull that here. Rinse and blot, and I'm going to carefully tickle between these vein lines just to pretty much fill this in. Now this other part of the petal, I'm going to wait a minute while that dries. But there's a very dark edge here, which I'm going to put in right in here. It's almost black. And then while that dries, we can come back up and finish this petal. So we need just the Winsor Blue Red shade, but we need a little bit more color than what we put down already. So a darker version of what's already here. And I'm going to put the slightest bit of rose in with that too. Okay, this edge back here is darker. It's pretty dark though. Just picking up another brush so I don't have to rinse out the one I've got in my hand. And picking up some of that pigment. That's better. And add just a little bit of water to that so that it gets lighter. Okay, and then over here is where this petal, it like is being born out of this spot in the middle. So there's this little tiny blue ruffle. I'm going to leave that for right now. I'm going to come back and soften some edges in a minute. I don't want to introduce too much water into that now. So back in here, this needs to go darker. So I need to get a darker version of my violet color. I'm using the cobalt violet with a little bit of the blue. And that comes down the middle here. And then fades away. So now I'm going to rinse, blot, and soften. Just a little bit darker edge over here. Okay. Okay, we can put this bottom petal in. I think I need to add some rose to that so it matches better. Coming right along the back edge, down around where this dark spot is. And I want to leave a tiny white ruffle edge along here. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come over here and do this leaf. And this is just a repeat of what we did over here. It's extremely dark. So if we go back to our mixed colors, and if yours have dried, I just use a spray bottle to revive my paints that have dried. I just spray a little water in, and they will reconstitute. Now I already put in this blue edge here. There's a little bit of lighter green in here, but for the most part, this is just very dark green. So let's see. I'll pick up a little bit of my lighter green, and I realize this is way too light, but we're going to go right over this with the darker color. I'm going to go right into my dark green. I'm going to come right up to the edge of that petal. Now I'm going to go into darker green yet, darkest green that I mixed before. And if you don't recall what that mix was, it was the Winsor green yellow shade plus Winsor blue red shade plus the rose color. And it really does look just about black. I want to put it on somewhat streaky, so it looks like there's veins and contour to the petal. Now I'm going to add this very dark green color to the bottom of each one of these petals. These are very, very dark. Yeah, that's dry. And it fades off to nothing. I'll just use another brush to soften the edge of that. Same thing over here. Remember, as you come down with your stroke, if you apply more pressure to your brush, your stroke will get wider and deposit more paint. Stuck my hand in my wet green. I really need to be more careful. Okay. Now, we still have some work left to do over in here, but I'm noticing this petal here. I wanted it to be gray, but I think it looks a bit too gray. So what I'm going to do to make it look a little bit bluer is just go over it with a wash of the original Winsor blue red shade. This shows you how you can change tones and color temperatures and whatnot just by glazing on top of what you've already got. And by glaze, I mean it's a transparent layer of paint. I want to be sure you can see this. I can see through my paint down to my palette. I don't want it so thick and juicy like the green that I was just using that it totally covers it up. I want to enhance what I have, not cover it up. So I need to be able to see through it. And now I'm just going to apply this color on top of the gray. And now it looks blue. Much better, much more appealing. So before we go to the background, it's things like that that I want to do to clean up what I've got. But we're just about finished with all the flower parts. But so as I'm comparing my photo to what I've got here, I can see that this shape is too light for, this is too light on this edge of the petal. So I need to darken that. I'm going to do the same thing by picking up a wash of color. And this is a fairly purpley mix, so I want to be sure I've got rose mixed in with it. But again, I want it to be a transparent wash. I don't want to obliterate what I have. I want to just calm it down. So I'm going on top of this edge with this wash. And this, it's not quite such a harsh edge, so I'm delicately going to soften that edge. There, that's better. So it's a matter of looking at your whole painting right now and seeing, are there areas like that that I need to change or enhance? Okay, I'm seeing another one. This middle part right here is not dark enough. So I need to go over that again with a mix that starts out bluer and ends up more violet. Little puddly, I'm just picking up some pigment. Okay, that's better. This is a little rough right here. I think that I should soften between. And that was just a matter of a damp brush, smoothing in between those lines. And that to me looks much better. This little corner of this petal here is not looking right. It should be darker. So I'm going to darken that. That's better. This could be a little bit darker back here. Okay. Okay, I need to soften a little bit inside this petal. That's better. I could put a little bit of a dark edge on parts of this petal. Makes it look a little bit more dimensional, like there's a thickness to the petal. There's a thicker edge to it. All these tiny little things just make a difference in your painting. Same thing over here. Just pull a little bit of that color in, and then we're going to soften that. Very light touch. We could darken, I can see that. We've got to darken underneath this petal, because right now the values are too similar and they kind of just combine together in the same space. So we need to darken behind so that it pulls this one forward. Just a wash. And you can see what a difference that made. Now it looks like this petal's on top of this one. Same thing for that spot that's in between here. And then I'm going to soften that. These little things that you do make such a big difference in how this all looks. I think I would like to soften just a little bit more in between here. This is just a little bit stark. This petal here could be a bit bluer. Just putting a wash of the initial blue red shade on top of it. Same thing with this one. And I would say with this petal as well, I'm going to put a wash of the Winsor blue red shade. I kind of lost, I'm going to try to pick up some pigment here because there's more of a highlight here. I think over here could also use some of this blue. And then we have to put in the dark spots on the yellow beards, and that was with the rose color. That's a bit heavy, but I'm going to soften that. And I can see I didn't quite come to the edge over here in this petal. And I'm going to sweep some of this blue color in here. And that blue is pretty strong, so be careful with it. You don't want to get it too much. Okay, there's one more thing I'm seeing, and that's the edge. And this leaf right here needs to have this very dark green like we had here. So I'll just go to that darkest green mix and put that in. And then soften the edge. All right. So for right now, that concludes the entire flower piece. The next thing to tackle is the background. And I will take a break while this all dries, and then we will come back and tackle that background.